Daniel is suffering from chronic nightmares that involve being chased by a giant Galvatron through what he deems as a really awful place. Awakening from one of these nightmares, he finds Rodimus Prime, the Autobot leader, at his bedside. And after Daniel explains what happens in his nightmare, Rodimus offers Daniel some advice.
Really awful place.
The next time you have that nightmare, imagine me fighting the giant Galvatron.
That's right. Thanks, Rodimus.
Rodimus leaves Daniel, completely unaware that ominous events are in the boy's immediate future. Instead, he joins Ultra Magnus and Springer at an unknown location. While exploring, the group find themselves ambushed by the Predacons, a subgroup of Decepticons who transform into giant mechanical jungle animals. The two sides begin a fight that is only halted when a werewolf, a gargoyle, and Frankenstein's monster appear. The two sides turn their attention away from each other to fight these strange creatures, only to find that their might has no effect on them. And to make matters worse, while the two Transformers groups are at a disadvantage, a giant pink dragon swoops down to kidnap Springer and Razorclaw, taking them away.
What's going on around here?
So by now you're probably wondering why this crazy kind of shit is actually happening. I mean, after all, the Transformers have never actually had to fight creatures from B horror movies before. Well, in the next scene, it's explained that the Quintessons have kidnapped Daniel and are using his nightmares against the Autobots. How this is actually coming about isn't really explained. Were the Autobots sucked into Daniel's nightmares, or are the Quintessons pulling shit out of Daniel's imagination while he's asleep and throwing it into the real world? It's just not explained and no one knows. But then again, I guess that makes it spookier, doesn't it? From here, Rodimus Prime and Ultra Magnus have to figure out what exactly is going on. At the same time, they have to negotiate a seemingly endless gauntlet of dangers, including a strange Hydra creature, monster plants, and a funhouse.
This resembles an Earth funhouse, but I have a feeling we're not in it for a fun time.
By this point, though, Rodimus is beginning to suspect that some kind of outside influence is helping them through their struggle. The suspicion's proven right later on when a giant Galvatron actually appears, causing Rodimus to realise that the Transformers have somehow been caught up in Daniel's nightmare. And this leads to probably my favourite scene from any of the episodes of the original Transformers cartoon.
Become someone your own size, Galvatron. Destroy you! A giant version of me is battling the giant Galvatron. This is Danny's nightmare. This is gonna sound bizarre, Magnus, but I think we're inside Danny's nightmare.
So Rodimus and his group gets what's going on. So what about Springer and Razorclaw? Well, let's backtrack a bit. See, when the dragon kidnapped the pair, the dragon took them to his castle. And yes, he does have a castle. How that works, I have no idea. He threw them into the castle dungeon because I guess he wanted Springer and Razorclaw to see what a fine dungeon he had, as you do. There, Springer rescues a strangely familiar princess who explains that the dragon actually kidnapped her and imprisoned her in the dungeon. She offers the two robots a huge sum of her father's gold, her father being a king, in exchange for helping her to escape. While Razorclaw never seemed interested in Springer or the princess before, hearing about gold actually perks up his interest. However, not wishing to help Springer in any way, shape or form, considering the fact that Springer's an Autobot, it seems that Springer's on his own. However, with a plan that isn't explained, Springer and the others actually do escape the dungeon, but are cornered by the dragon. Springer attempts to use a magic lance to slay the dragon with, as you do, but the dragon is too much for Springer to handle alone. It's only then that Razorclaw actually decides to spring into action, and yes, the pun is totally intended. And this is actually another one of my most favourite Transformers cartoon scenes.
Oh, thank you both!
Glad to be of service. But the question now is, how do we return to the others?
Oh, I can lead you there. It's the least I can do.
But how?
We follow this road.
A yellow brick road? I don't believe any of this.
Now completely aware that this is Daniel's imagination, Rodimus attempts to contact Daniel, who responds. The group, complete with Springer and Razorclaw again, run through a gamut of harmful shit, including a rainbow-coloured tidal wave. Eventually though, after running through a gamut of dangerous shit, including the rainbow-coloured tidal wave, the Autobots rescue Daniel.
Come on! Danny needs us! Hurry!
Danny!
With the Predacons beaten and battered from the fun and adventures that they'd just had from the last 23 minutes, they simply take off because they're at a disadvantage, and Predacons don't fight Autobots if they're at a disadvantage. It's then that Daniel awakens from another nightmare, only to be consoled by Rodimus again, in a scene that looks pretty familiar from the beginning of the show, which is probably supposed to be artistic in some kind of way. Daniel explains that he had the worst nightmare of his entire life, but he took Rodimus Prime's advice and did exactly what Rodimus said. He called upon a giant Rodimus to fight the giant Galvatron, and the giant Rodimus won. Rodimus explains that Daniel was able to control his dream, and from then on Daniel won't be able to have any more nightmares, or at least if he does, he'll be able to deal with them, as he explains in the final seconds of the show. So that was the entire gist of that episode, and you're probably wondering what I thought of it by now. Well, to be honest with you, this episode is one of my favourite episodes of the original Transformers cartoon show, which might shock you, it might not, I'm not entirely sure what you think, but some of the reasons for the reason I like this episode so much, outside of it being clearly a Halloween special, is probably the fact that instead of the episode focusing completely on the Transformers fight against each other, it takes a small group of the Autobots and a small group of the Decepticons and throws them into something that's completely over the top and almost ridiculous to a point. This actually does seem like some kind of be a horror movie of its own. Like those movies where, somebody is sucked into their TV and has to run through all the horrors of television. It reminds me of that. The fact there are witches, giants, dragons, gargoyles, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster just flying at the Transformers every which way, it makes it feel like just everything's going on non-stop, And I always enjoy it best when there's never any sort of pause or any break in the action, and I think that's what I enjoy about this episode the most, is the fact that there is nothing but endless action coming at you and flying at you every which way. Some of the scenes are ridiculous. For example, when Springer's fighting the dragon and the princess is trying to convince Razorclaw to help out, Razorclaw just kind of like sighs, really exasperated, and throws Springer onto his back, and the pair begin to work together. But when the princess cautions Springer to be careful, Razorclaw backbitingly growls what she said, "Be careful, Springer." This episode is filled with all kinds of sarcasm and ridiculous stuff, and I actually think that the dynamic between Razorclaw and Springer, even though it was just for a few minutes, actually is one of the things that really makes this episode. They almost seem like they should have their own spin-off show together. I guess like a traditional cop show, Razor Claw's the really sort of surly one, and Springer's, you know, the traditional good guy. Outside of that as well, you know, the scene with the giant Rodimus and the giant Galvatron, like I said, is one of my favourite scenes from the Transformers cartoon. I have no idea why, I just remember when I watched it as a kid, and all of a sudden the giant Rodimus comes into view and smacks the shit out of the giant Galvatron. I just went nuts over that, and to be honest, when I still watch this episode back again and again, the impact of that has never ever been lost on me, and that's something that I find really, really enjoyable. So with all that in mind, as you can plainly tell, this is one of my favourite Transformers episodes, and it's a great episode to watch on a dark Halloween night such as the one that's coming up next week. And so that concludes today's Rocket Vlog and today's scare of Halloween. I'll be back with another vlog same time next week, and you're gonna love it. Bye bye.